All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. Forgive me, I literally just rolled out of bed. So my voice is not warmed up and it feels weird. So hopefully it'll get better as we go. So we are going to be continuing on the path of the lingering soul. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this stuff, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on. All those things are super important. That being said, let's get into this. We've already talked about how the Lingering Soul itself is kind of a weird class. First of all, you can't multi-class with this class, which means balance for the class is very, very different from other classes because you don't have to worry about multi-classing. And the defining feature of it is unique, to say the least. Quick reminder on 5th edition class design. Every class is designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. In order to do that, every class has these things that we call defining features. Defining features are things either unique to the class or maybe not unique, but they get them differently, or they can use them differently, or they get them earlier than any other class. So the defining feature of the Lingering Soul is really only one for the most part, and that is the possession mechanic. Just like ghost monsters, the Lingering Soul can possess an enemy, and as written, while you're possessing the enemy, you basically can use your actions to either move the enemy by making it do a dash. You can have the enemy take the dodge action, or the person, you can actually, it doesn't have to be enemies that you possess, it can be allies as well, or you can have them make a single weapon attack. The way I originally read it was you could basically use your actions to make them take a specific action that you choose, which is a huge thing for modifying the action economy. That's again, that's not how it's written, but that's tends to be how I prefer to interpret the possession, just because I think it makes for a more interesting class. That being said, we've done 2 subclasses already. The first subclass that we did, where did my... Because my mouse is just gone. Every so often my mouse will just go, you know what? It doesn't matter that I have power, I'm just going to pretend that I don't. And it annoys the hell out of me. There we go. Alright, so the first subclass was called the Poltergeist, and that one was basically built around the idea that the Poltergeist can actually wield weapons and wear armor more like a normal character. Every other subclass in the base class of the Lingering Soul can't actually use weapons, they can't actually wear armor, and so the way they get around like magic items is they actually have a feature they get at 3rd level, so it's not quite a defining feature, but it is definitive of the class. And that is the ability to consume enchantments. Basically, they can take a magic weapon or armor or magic item and basically absorb the enchantment into themselves, making the item mundane, but allowing them to use it as if they had that item in their possession, because they can't actually use magic items normally. And that comes with its own set of weird things. So yeah, the calling of the Poltergeist was meant to make them a little bit more traditional. Calling of the Wraith was basically a creature that is really kind of built on the idea of going in and kind of draining hit points out of an enemy as they take more damage. Very much a frontline kind of spellcastery, because it's a little bit more spell-based They don't actually cast spells, but the attacks and things that they do are much closer to spell effects than they are to weapon attacks and things like that. And at the end of it, it gets the ability to create a few minions. But for today, we're going to be dealing with the calling of the Spirit Guardian. So this one, I've mentioned this quite a few times before. This one actually emphasizes the idea of possessing your allies over possessing your enemies. Either way that you read the possession feed, the way it's written or the way that I think it should be written, possessing enemies is a big deal for this class, and it can really change the battlefield in a lot of different ways. This one, however, kind of gets rid of the idea that you're going to be possessing enemies, which possessing enemies comes with a host of problems. They can resist your possession, and then they become immune to the possession for 24 hours. If you get hit by some sort of spell or effect that forces you out of them, they again are immune to the possession for 24 hours, which, due to the fact that most enemies don't survive a single combat session, means that they are effectively immune for the rest of their life, however short that may be. So a lot of the possession things are a one-and-done ability, whereas with allies, they can voluntarily choose to fail the saving throws and can choose to be repossessed. So there's, even when you are forced out for whatever reason, there's a little bit more leeway in possessing your allies than it is in possessing your enemies, but it also comes with some drawbacks. And that's what the calling of the Spirit Guardian is meant to mess around with and incentivize. So let's dive into it. So at first level, you get Invoke Smite. As an action, target a weapon or object within 30 feet of you. Until the end of your next turn, the next time that weapon or object hits a creature, it deals... Oh, I guess we should start with... we'll come back to Invoke Smite in just a second. The first thing we have to deal with, actually, is the aspect and the saving throw. That's another thing that's unique about this class, is the base class only gets a single saving throw, and it doesn't tell you what your primary attribute is going to be. That's actually chosen by your subclass. For the Spirit Guardian, for your aspect, which is going to be your defining attribute, the thing that you use for all of your attack rolls and your save DCs and the things like that. For the Spirit Guardian, you choose either Wisdom or Charisma to become your aspect. So this, again, is another one that's more heavily weighted towards kind of spellcasting style of effects. And in this one in particular, you're going to see a lot of things that feel very, very kind of cleric-based, divine magic-based, as we'll find out once we go back to Invoke Smite. You get to choose one of those to become your aspect, and then you also get proficiency in Charisma saving throws. Charisma saving throws are probably the rarest saving throws in the game. But when you make a Charisma saving throw, it tends to be for something like mind control kind of spell. Which, if your character gets mind controlled, sometimes it can be as simple as, well, this dude that you're trying to kill is now your best buddy. But other times it can be, oh, look, the big baddie now has control over every thing that you do and can turn your 8th and 9th level spells against your party. So, there are very specific situations when Charisma saving throws are going to be very, very useful, but they tend to be relatively limited. So, that being said, now let's actually move to Invoke Smite. So, at first level, you get Invoke Smite. I'm going to read it again. As an action, you can target a weapon or object within 30 feet of you. Until the end of your next turn, the next time that weapon or object hits a creature, it deals an additional 1d8 radiant damage if you are good or neutral, or 1d8 necrotic damage if you are evil. You can use this feature while possessing a host, and the damage is increased by a d8 at 6th, 11th, and 15th level. So, this is effectively This is effectively a spell kind of buff, very similar to the smite spells that you will find. I think clerics get some of them, but paladins get a lot of them, which are basically normally the smite spells. The way that they work is you use your bonus action to cast it, and then the next time you hit with whatever weapon you can cast it on, you do additional damage and some other stuff like burning smite sets them on fire, or other things like that. So this is kind of similar to a smite. The big difference being instead of casting it on your own weapon, you're going to be casting it on someone else's weapon, and it requires your action instead of your bonuses action. Now, something that I mentioned before, for possession specifically, possession states the only abilities that you can use while you're possessing a host are ones that specifically say you can use this while possessing. And this one in particular allows you to do that. Now, you do not have to be possessing a host to be able to use this, and it does use your action. So the big benefit of possessing is you get to use your action to control that character, and this basically allows you to use your action to just buff the character's next weapon attack. It would seem that kind of seems like a downside, because now you have to choose between controlling the character or buffing the character. And if you're not controlling the character, then there's no real reason to possess, right? Well, that's the other thing about possession is when you're possessing a creature, you take half the damage that they take. So possessing does have a defensive benefit. Lingering souls are already resistant to most physical damage types, but possessing a host effectively makes them resistant to all damage no matter what, because the only damage they can take is damage that the player, the character that they're possessing, takes. So Invoke Smite is starting the process of incentivizing using your possession more defensively and using your actions and the things like that to make your allies stronger. Now, with Invoke Smite, one of the things that you want to be aware of is you need to... you don't need to possess the right person. You just have to make sure that the right person you're possessing is within 30 feet. The right person that you want to cast this on is within 30 feet of the person you're possessing. So it doesn't mean if you want to use this on the paladin, you have to possess the paladin, because here's another thing. Frontline fighters are going to take more damage than ranged or, back of the line fighters. So, possessing someone that stays away from combat but still using this on weapon-based characters is going to give you kind of the best of both worlds. You'll be away from danger and therefore not taking as much damage, and even when you do take damage, you'll be taking less damage than anyone else. But also, you are going to want to make sure that you are using this Invoke Smite on someone that's going to get the most benefit. Generally, the people that are going to get the most benefit, because this is a flat D8. This is an actual additional dice. The people that get the most benefit from this are going to be people that have a better chance to crit, because the way that a critical hit works in 5th edition is you double the number of dice that you roll. So that would mean that when you add a D8, or again, it becomes more D8 the higher your level is, you're going to be able to increase it more. Like a crit on a single D8 turns it into 2D8, but a crit on 4D8, which is what you'd be doing at 15th level, would turn it into 8D8 additional damage. So targeting characters that get advantage on a regular basis, things like rogues with their height ability, they get advantage a lot. Barbarians are another one that are really, really good for this, because barbarians are built to crit. Especially berserker barbarians, they're just built to quit. They get extra attacks. They have their reckless attack ability that gives an advantage on all of their attacks. They get extra benefits when they crit. So barbarians can be really, really powerful with Invoke Smite. It'll still only work on their first attack every turn, but that first attack is going to be a doozy, especially if they do crit. Another one that tends to be really, really good that a lot of people will undervalue just because it's considered the kind of milquetoast, boring fighter to play, but the Champion Fighter. Champion Fighter is a remarkably simple fighter to play. It is in the system's reference document because it's meant to be a very simple, easy to play character. Most of their abilities just do things like expand your criticals or something. They don't give you a lot of options that you have to choose from. The Champion Fighter just goes in, hits things, and kills them. That's what it does, and it does that very well. But because of their expanded criticals, giving a Champion Fighter Invoke Smite is more likely going to turn into huge, huge, huge damage. Because by the time they get to really high levels, I think it's 17 or 18, they can crit on an 18 on the die. So that's a 15% chance anytime they roll a d20 to crit. If they have advantage on any of the rolls from anything, which is one of the reasons why Fairy Fire is super awesome. If they have advantage on any of the rolls, you can increase that 15% by another number that requires a lot more math than I'm willing to do right now. But yeah, so choose your character that you're going to invoke the Smite on carefully, because there's certain characters that are just going to get a better benefit from it, and there's going to be no benefit to anyone using spell attacks. So you don't ever want to use Invoke Smite on like a wizard or something like that, unless for some bizarre reason the wizard's going to go up and bop someone with their staff, or they're a Bladesinger and can do awesome stuff already. So in that case, smite up the Bladesinger. Wow, Bladesinger with Smite would be super fun, because not only would they get the additional damage, but most Bladesingers use one of the Bladesinger cantrips instead of actual attacks. So they already can do serious damage with a single attack, and then you add on Smite damage. Oh, that would be fun. All right. Anyway, moving on. Also, at first level, you get Sympathetic Mending. As an action, target a creature within 30 feet of you to regain a number of hit points equal to 1d8 plus your aspect modifier. You can use this feature while possessing a host, and if your host is not your target, the host also regains hit points equal to your aspect modifier. You can use this feature twice. Upon reaching 6th level, the healing increases by 1d8, and you can use this feature 3 times. 11th, another d8 4 times. 15th, another d8, and you can use it for 5 times. Regain all uses of this feature after a long rest. So, first things first about this, tie the number of uses to the proficiency bonus. When this class was written, that wasn't a thing. That didn't start happening until Tasha's Kika came out, so that's probably why Matt didn't even think about it. But it would make this significantly less wordy, because this is effectively just a cantrip heal that levels up as you go, that you get more uses as you go, and just tying it to proficiency bonus makes it significantly easier. You level it up at set levels, as opposed to, again, if you tie it to an attribute score, it means by 8th level maximum, it's going to be maxed out. So this allows it to keep improving. So that being said, this is the other choice that you have. Both of these can be used while you're possessing. So again, your possessions are going to be a little more defensive than offensive, but this one gives you another benefit to choosing who you possess, which is if you target a different creature than the one that you are possessing, the character that you're possessing is going to get kind of leftover heals. It's only going to get heals based on your aspect modifier, so the maximum amount they will ever get is 5 hit points from just the residual heals, but that's still just extra heals that you get to add. So again, choosing the host that you're going to possess is very, very important, because again, if you choose the paladin frontline fighter who's just getting his ass kicked over and over and over again, you're going to be taking more damage, and the additional 5 hit points is really not going to be that beneficial for him, because it's barely going to cushion a single blow. However, if you possess maybe like the Ranger, they're still going to get hit, but they're probably not going to get hit every single turn, unlike the Paladin or the Barbarian or something like that. And therefore, using this ability, especially multiple times over a combat or multiple combats, is going to provide a better benefit for them, because they're just not losing as many hit points as quickly, and they have a longer amount of time to regain hit points before they're going to be hit again. So, yes, this does mean that you now have 3 choices when you possess a creature. For again, if we're going on the as written word, for a defensive possession, really the only thing you're ever going to do for the most part is you're going to use the dodge action, because that just makes all attacks against them have disadvantage, which is very nice. Or the dash action, just to position them to a better place. But for most of the time, you're just going to be using the dodge action. Making weapon attacks, mostly because you can't use any of their abilities or anything with it, is probably not going to be as useful for you as it would be if you were possessing an enemy, because their attacks generally tend to hit harder. Because, again, they're not meant to live through campaigns. They're meant to exist in a single combat scenario. So you have a choice between effectively dodging, Invoking Smite, or Sympathetic Mending. So this very much turns into a support class. You're generally not going to be doing a ton of damage or killing a ton of enemies, but you're going to be setting up your allies to win, which I like. I like support control-based classes. This one I don't really call a control that much, because you're not really doing a ton of controlling. This one is much closer to just a support-based class, which doesn't tend to exist a lot in D&D, mostly because in earlier editions, things like clerics were generally primarily support classes, and it's super boring to play in earlier editions when everyone else is doing cool stuff, and you're like, oh, I'll go over and touch this dude so that he regains hit points. This time I'm going to go over to this dude and make him regain hit points. Oh, look, I make him regain hit points. Yay. It just wasn't fun. That's why in 4th edition, they made healing a minor action, the equivalent of a bonus action in 5th edition. And let leaders was the role, which were effectively healers. Let them do more cool things. In 5th edition, they kind of took a step back from that, where you do have some bonus action abilities like Healing Word that allow you to heal, but healing is not nearly as powerful in 5th edition as it was in 4th edition, and so you tend to just not do as much massive combat healing in general. So it's interesting. I like the fact that it levels up. I like the fact that it gives you a choice between, augmenting damage or doing some healing. I like the fact that it has like a residual bleed heal kind of thing. I mean, the whole ability is just a cool ability that I like. So, yeah. Going to 6th level, you get Divine Barrier. While you're possessing a host, if an attacker that you can see hits your host with an attack, you can use your reaction to grant your host a bonus to their AC or saving throw against the triggering attack equal to your aspect modifier. Once the attack is resolved, the possession immediately ends, and you cannot use your possession feature until the end of your next turn. So, this one is really, really interesting. As I mentioned before, possession is interesting in the idea that an unwilling creature can resist your possession. And if they do successfully resist the possession, they're immune to your possession for 24 hours, which in combat means for the rest of their lives. But this specifically says a creature can fail the saving throw voluntarily, so you can voluntarily allow yourself to be possessed. And at the bottom where it says, the host creature is immune to your possession for 24 hours after succeeding on the possession saving throw, or after the possession ends, parentheses, unless the creature wishes otherwise. So, again, repossessing an ally is something that you can do. However, with this ability, this effectively allows you, it gives you a use for your reaction, a really useful use for your reaction, to be honest, because you get to increase, at 6th level, you're probably going to have at least a 3, probably a 4 or 5 as your aspect modifier. So you can increase their AC against a single attack by 4 or 5 points, which is massive in D&D. This is effectively a single attack shield spell. And shield is considered by some people to be one of the more broken first level spells just because of how powerful it is. So it does come with some limitations. The first one being it forces you out of the host, so it ends the possession, and you can't possess anything else until the end of your next turn. So you're going to spend at least one turn outside of your host. Now, the first two abilities you got, Invoke Smite and Sympathetic Mimicking, can be used outside a host. So you can still do the exact same thing you were doing before, just outside a host for a turn. Just get to a place where you're not going to die, and then you can possess a host in the next turn. Divine Barrier, you have to be possessing the host that is attacked. And so again, this gives you another choice. If you this actually can be used pretty effectively as a get out of jail free card, kind of, for possessing a frontline fighter, because you can sit there and they can take damage, and you can take damage with them. But as soon as you realize, oh, bad things are about to happen, like you get a big creature with a 3 or 4 multi-attack coming after you. The first one that misses, you can activate Divine Barrier, hopefully saving it, but it pops you out of them so that target is only going to be taking the damage, and you are not going to be taking the damage. Now, it does mean that theoretically the creature could target you at that point, and that will entirely depend on the situation of combat and everything like that. But knowing those situations, knowing if they're trying to kill you or trying to kill your host, you can kind of make the decision of, okay, this is a good way for me to prevent getting damage for a little bit while still being able to do the things that I want. Or you can just use this as a way, again, if you're possessing a less frontline combatant, you can just use this to one of the few attacks that they get hit by. You can increase their AC, get bopped out for a little bit, and then do your stuff for a turn, and then next turn you go and possess them again. Now, one thing you do need to remember, possession is a bonus action. And there's not really a ton of bonus actions you have built into the class other than possession. So, understanding that your bonus action when you're outside of a body, especially as a Spirit's Guardian, is going to be used to possess a creature, you probably don't want to be getting too many feats or things like that will give you bonus action abilities, because you're just not going to use them. To be honest, I don't think there's a ton of bonus action ability feats that you could use as a Lingering Soul, just because you can't actually do most of the things. Like crossbow expertise is a really common one to give you a free bonus action shot. The issue with that being you have to have a hand crossbow in your offhand, and Lingering Souls can't carry weapons. Even the Poltergeist can't actually carry weapons. They can just pick them up and attack with them a couple times, but they're not actually carrying them, so it's impossible for them to do a wield. So anyway, Divine Barrier, interesting ability, and there's a lot of different choices you have. A lot of people only view this as, oh, I can protect my ally, but you can use Divine Barrier just as easily to protect yourself from dealing with really bad amounts of damage all at once. Again, the Lingering Soul has a D6 hit die. You have the lowest hit points of any class in the game. You're not going to be able to take a bunch of damage, even though while you're possessing something, you are taking half damage. Still, you can't afford to even take a lot of half damage. So look at Divine Barrier not only as a way to protect your host, but also a way to protect yourself, because it forces the end of the possession. So, moving forward, at 11th level, you get Consecrated Emanation. You can use an action to emit an aura around you up to a distance of 15 feet for up to 1 minute. You then designate any number of creatures you can see to be unaffected by it. An affected creature's speed is halved in the area, and when the creature enters the area for a first time on a turn or starts its turn there, it must make a wisdom save. On a failed save, the creature takes 3d6 radiant damage if you're good or neutral, or 3d6 necrotic damage if you're evil. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage. You can use this feature while possessing a host. Once you use this feature, you must finish a short or long rest before you can use it again. So this is a one and done ability, kind of. It's a one and done short rest ability versus a one and done long rest. So not once per day, but once per short rest. As I have mentioned before, I'm not a massive fan of one and done abilities because they have to be really powerful to justify the one and done, due to the what I call the elixir paradox, or the elixir problem. I think I've called it a bunch of different things. But anyway, the idea is in like Final Fantasy is where this comes from. But in Final Fantasy, there are certain items called elixirs that you can find throughout the game. You, in general, you can never buy them. So there is a finite number of elixirs in the entire game. And you can only get them by finding them in chests or random places. Because of that, the elixir is a really powerful thing. It gives you 100% of your hit points and magic points. It's the only item in the game that does that. And especially items that restore magic points tend to be relatively rare and really expensive. So people will generally save their elixirs, always going, well, yeah, I could use it, but what if I need it in a later battle? And so they will get to the final boss and have 11 elixirs in their inventory. And then they'll beat the final boss, and they will have never used any of their elixirs, or they'll only have used one or two. When throughout the game, there was a lot of situations where it would have helped, and they wouldn't have run out. But because it's so rare, they're very, very hesitant to use it unless it is the exact perfect situation. That's how one-and-done abilities basically are dealt with in D&D. Not on purpose, it's just how people do them. They just won't use them because they'll always say, well, what if there's a better place? So for a one-and-done ability to be useful, it needs to be a very, very useful ability. And this really, really describes that well. First of all, you can use it while possessing a host. Very, very good. You get to choose who's unaffected by it, which is really good. And it also says you designate any number of creatures you can see to be unaffected by it. So it doesn't mean that they have to, your entire party has to be next to it when it goes off. You can just go, my entire party is not affected by this. It does damage every turn, which is really, really nice. It slows the creature, any creatures in there, which is really nice for control-based thing. And the slow effect is not affected by a save. The damage is affected by a save, but it always does stun damage. And it lasts for a minute, which, again, in combat is 10 rounds. Most combat never goes beyond about 5 or 6 rounds. So this is effectively for all of combat. Now, there is a pattern forming here. Everything you do with this class is an action. So every time you do something, you have to choose, okay, do I want to invoke a smite? Do I want to use sympathetic mending? Do I want to use Consecrated Emanation? Because you can only use one of those every turn. The nice thing about Consecrated Emanation is the fact that it keeps going. It is not a concentration spell, which is really, really nice, meaning if you take damage, it's never going to end early, which is really, really nice. It's not a spell at all, so it can't be counterspelled. It can't be stopped in any way, shape, or form. And you do it once, and then for the rest of battle, you do other things. This also means the choice of your possession target is really important. This one specifically can be used against enemies. And this could be an interesting combo with Divine Barrier. So, Divine Barrier knocks you out. You can't use your possession mechanic to the end of your next turn. I have to check really quick here. Yeah, it says you can use this feature while possessing a host. I was about to say I didn't see that thing where it said you can use it possessing a host, even though I read it. So I'm like, wait a minute, did I? So anyway, with this you could bop out with Divine Barrier. On your next turn, you activate Consecrated Emanation, which makes any creature that starts its turn there or enters it take some damage, and it halves their speed, and it's a 15-foot radius from you. So most creatures have kind of the default speed is 30 feet. If they are outside your barrier, to walk into your barrier costs 10 feet instead of 5, and they take damage. So if they are more than 5 feet away from the edge of your barrier, they cannot get to you with a speed of 30 feet, because they would take 5 feet and then it would cost them 10 feet, 10 feet. To move that last 5 feet, they don't have enough movement speed. They can't hurt you. So because you can't possess anything else, you could use Consecrated Emanations to basically give you a buffer zone and then repossess the host the next turn and start, smiting or mending or whatever you will want to do. So it's a really cool kind of combo with stuff that you already have. In addition to that, this does give you an incentive to possess the frontline fighters, because the ones in the back are not going to get any benefit from this because you need enemies within 15 feet of them. Or again, this could be a benefit to possessing an enemy, because now you can activate this thing, and then the enemy is always, always, always going to have half speed and is going to have to make a save every turn because they can't get out of the aura because you are possessing them. The aura is centered on them and moves with them. And it also means anytime they get close to one of their friends, they're going to hurt their friends as well. Like, it really adds a lot of choices where there's never going to be a 100% always correct choice. There's going to be a lot of other nuance to it. So I really like that ability. I think it's cool. I think it's powerful enough to be a one and done ability on a short rest. So yeah. Moving on, at 15th level, you get Save Your Spirit. All friendly creatures within 30 feet of you gain 1 hit point on a death saving throw roll of 18 to 20 on the d20. This aura remains while possessing a host. This is massive. I've mentioned before, healing is not nearly as powerful in 5th edition as it has been in earlier editions, simply because none of the healing generally does enough to, until you get to really, really high level healing spells, like 5th, 6th, 7th level healing spells, none of the healing really does enough to kind of justify using healing in the middle of combat. Generally, the most beneficial healing you can do is healing someone that's unconscious, because it brings, anytime you get to at least having 1 hit point from 0 hit points, you regain the ability to take actions and things like that. And so from the action economy standpoint, it gives you much, much more benefit than just giving someone across the field enough hit points to cushion them from maybe a single blow that they're going to take. Save Your Spirit kind of capitalizes on that idea of bringing people to consciousness is super, super useful. And it doesn't require anything from the Lingering Soul. There's no limited uses of this feature. There are no resources you have to burn. There's no actions you have to use for this. It just happens. As long as you're within 30 feet. Normally the way healing or death saves work is if you roll a 10 or above, you make your death save, and 3 made death saves stabilizes you. You don't have to make any more rolls. A 9 or below, you fail your death save. And then for crits, if you get a 1, that's 2 failed death saves. If you get a nat 20, you regain a single hit point, which means you stop making death saves because you are conscious again. And the thing with death saves is they start at the beginning of your turn, not the end. So, that means if you get a nat 20 on your death save, you get to get up and take your entire turn. So that's hugely beneficial. This increases the chance of a quote-unquote nat 20 down to an 18. So you go from a 5% chance to a 15% chance. You've just tripled the likelihood that they're going to get up on their own. The only limitation to this is it has to be within 30 feet of you. So again, choosing your host wisely is important. Or maybe getting out of the possession and just moving to where you're in a position when there's a single character or multiple characters that are unconscious, just making sure that your lingering soul is in a place that you can get as many of them in this aura as possible. Because that's a really big thing. You don't have to waste spells. You don't have to waste actions to get them back up. They just get up effectively for free, and they get to use their entire turn to do whatever they will want to. This is a really, really big deal. It doesn't feel overpowered because it's a 15th level ability, and it is 1 hit point. It's very, very useful, but I don't really feel like it's game breaking because it still relies on a die roll. It's still only a 15% chance. And it's not giving them a new ability. It's simply expanding the chance that a good thing could happen. And it also means that anything... I believe there are a few abilities that give you advantage on death saves. I think they're extremely rare, but I do think they exist. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments down below. But anything that's going to increase the chance that you can, like if they have luck or something like that, might mean that the person that has Healing Word might go, you know what? I'm not going to use my Healing Word or my Cure Wounds on this person because I have a better use of my bonus action this turn, and there's a chance that they might be able to pop up. Or something that might be really, really useful. If you have a Divination Wizard, they get to make 2 rolls at the beginning of the day and just replace a roll. Well, if they roll at 18, 19, or 20, that would mean that they can go, oh, don't worry, when this person goes up, I have already foreseen that roll. They're going to come back with 1 hit point. Like, when you start combining this with the abilities of other classes without multi-classing, this turns into a really, really powerful group of ability. So, I like it. I think it's cool. Finally, also at 15th level, you get Guardian Transformation. At 15th level, you can use your action to temporarily imbue your host with some of your ghostly properties. For 10 minutes, your host gains the following features. They have damage resistance against bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons. They are immune to poison damage in the poison condition. They are immune to prone, grappled, restrained, and petrified condition. They can move through other creatures and objects as if they were difficult terrain. They take a d10 of force damage if they end their turn inside an object. And they have a fly speed equal to their speed. The duration ends prematurely if the possession ends. Once you use this feature, you must use a long rest before you can use it again. So this effectively gives them all the good stuff from your ghostly form feature from forever ago. That's a first level ability that I mentioned doesn't really count as a defining feature because it's never expanded upon. It's never even referenced in the rest of the class. It just kind of describes. It's a describing feature. Describes how the character works. So resistance against bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical weapons. It is exceedingly rare for an enemy to have a magical weapon. So this is effectively halves damage from physical attacks. Immune to poison damage in the poison condition. There are a lot of different features that give you this, especially by 15th level. Like monks are immune to poison at that point. They've been immune to poison since tier 2. Paladins are immune to poison. And there's a few other things that can give you immunity to poison. But this is still really, really nice, especially if you are dealing with something like a green dragon, that their breath is a poison weapon. So it's still pretty nice. But the immune to prone, grappled, restrained, and petrified is super, super useful. Prone is not something that a lot of monsters can do. There are a few, but it's nowhere near as common as the grappled and restrained condition. There are so many monsters that have attacks that auto-grapple or auto-restrain. And the grapple condition isn't horrible. It just means that your speed is 0. That is all the grapple condition does. A lot of people think there's more to it. No, all it is your speed is 0. That is the only thing that is changed at all, is you have 0 speed. The restrained condition is significantly worse. when you are restrained, all of your attack rolls have disadvantage. All attacks against you have advantage. It is a really, really useful condition to impose, and making the creature immune to them is super useful. Again, everything from things like vampires. Vampires have attacks that auto-grapple, and they have specific attacks they can only use against a grappled opponent. Making them immune to grapple makes them immune to one of the vampire's abilities. There are a bunch of other creatures that have similar features. The grappled and restrained condition are something that you deal with constantly in this game for good reason. It's a really good mechanic to impose on your enemies effectively. And it does allow for some interesting things. It modifies action economy, because to break a grapple, you have to use your action to do it. It's just a good thing. Making them immune to that is really, really good. The petrified condition just doesn't happen as much, to be blunt. There's really only a few creatures that have the ability to petrify, and I think a couple spells. It's very, very rare unless you're fighting Medusas or cockatrices. However you say that plurally, you're really not dealing with petrified. And again, prone just isn't something that a lot of monsters inflict a bunch. Despite the fact that prone is another really good condition and something that a lot of players undervalue how useful it can be. Especially if you can inflict both prone and grappled. Because prone, in order to get up from being prone, you have to use half your speed. If your speed is 0, you literally cannot get up from prone. And prone, all of your attack rolls are made with disadvantage, and any melee attacks made against you are advantage. So prone is kind of like a poor man's restrained. The one downside of prone is any ranged attacks against you have disadvantage. But combining prone and grapple can be an extremely effective way to effectively ground a creature and make them significantly easier to deal with, because they will have to use their action to break the grapple in order to just be able to stand up that turn. So that means they've wasted most of their turn, because they'll use half their movement and their action just to get them back to level up a playing field. So yeah, being able to get rid of all of those things is useful. The ability to move through creatures and objects as if they're difficult terrain is another really useful thing. And it also means you need to pick your possession host properly. This is another thing that will incentivize possessing a frontline fighter, and specifically staying in that frontline fighter despite the fact that they're taking damage. Now, with possession, the specific wording, you suffer damage equal to half of any damage dealt to the host while possessed. Which is a weird wording, to be blunt. And this isn't something I've dealt with yet, because we haven't really had to deal with resistances in that. I think I would still read it the same way. So the damage dealt and the damage taken, you could argue are two different things. Like, you dealt them 30 points of fire damage, but they have resistance to fire, so they only took 15. That is an argument I could see coming up, and that would be something that I would probably ask Mercer specifically for clarification on this, to see if he intended it to mean the you just take half damage as if you have resistance to the damage, or you take half of the damage they take, meaning if they have resistance, you effectively have double resistance, which doesn't exist in 5th edition, but you would take half of the damage they take, and they're already taking half damage, so you effectively would be taking quarter to the damage. If that is the way that is interpreted, which I think makes sense, that means that this is another way that you can make sure you're taking even less damage, but because by giving them resistance, you effectively give yourself extra resistance, because you will only take half the damage that is actually dealt to them. So if the attack was meant to do, 20 points of slashing damage, and now they have resistance against slashing damage, they only take 10 damage. Well, you take half the damage that they take, so you only take 5 damage from an attack that did 20. See how this works? This can be really, really useful. In the same vein, it can also still be very useful for your non-frontline fighters. Things like giving a ranger the ability to move through terrain can be incredibly useful, because then they can move through the tree and literally walk through the tree up there, or giving a ranger a flying speed. They can fly in the air and just rain down arrows with no issue. Like, there's just so many things. Now, the one thing that it doesn't mention here is they don't get the hover feature. So if you have the flying speed, but you don't have specifically the feature hover, that means at the end of your turn, you do need to land on something. You can't just stay there floating. Again, that might be, because I know the basic form of the Ghost does have the ability to hover, so it might be an oversight. But even if they can't hover, just the ability to fly and get to a position that people normally can't get to, which does incentivize your DM to think about the third dimension when they're designing combat. Even if you're only using to the 2D maps, you can still have elevation. And a lot of DMs tend to view combat on a 2D plane, and that's really, really boring combat. Once you start adding 3D planes, you start doing a lot more interesting, fun things. So, yeah. So, final thoughts. This is my favorite of the subclasses. It is the most interesting. It's the most unique. It is so different than anything that currently plays in the game. There's really almost nothing in this thing, in this subclass, that I think needs any sort of modification. Like I said, there's a few things in there that might use some clarification as far as how it works in specific situations. But beyond that, this is just a cool thing. And even if you read the possession feature the way I originally read it, the way I want to read it, where you can use your action to take away actions from the enemy, that actually doesn't conflict with the Spirit Guardian, because, again, you now have the choice of, you can use your Spirit Guardian stuff to aid your allies, or you can use your possession feature on enemies to affect action economy that way. It gives you a lot of choice about how you want to interact with combat. And I really like all of that. I think it's really, really interesting. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What is your personal favorite of the subclasses? I really want to know what you're thinking. Put those in the comments down below. Quick announcement on Monday, instead of my normal D&D deep dive, because Tal'Dorei Reborn doesn't launch until Tuesday, and that's going to be what my next D&D deep dives are all going to be about. On Monday, I'm going to be releasing my in-depth review of the new Power Rangers role-playing game system by Renegade Studios. I just got the PDF yesterday. I have so many thoughts and opinions on this, so I'm going to do an in-depth review for my first non-D&D product, and that's going to be going live on Monday, so be sure to tune into that. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye-bye-bye.